Hello and welcome. So today I'm going to go over how to write your concluding paragraph for your term paper, the requirements, and we'll go over a sample for it. So I'm going to use the same outline that we've been using for the sample outline and also the body paragraphs that I went over in class. So same topic and main points to go over the requirements for the concluding paragraph and then also the show you the sample. So just to remind you, so we're working with the topic of risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So our focus is risk factors, our topic is cardiovascular disease, our three main points: lifestyle choices, mental health, and chronic disease. Okay, so just to remind you, hopefully most of you are familiar with this topic and this sample by now. Okay. So basically for your term paper, you must have a conclusion. So remember, for the response paper, it was optional. It's not optional for the term paper. And as you'll see in the term paper rubric video, there is a separate grade just for your concluding paragraph. So it's important that you pay attention and you have the required parts for it. Basically, the structure that we teach you for the concluding paragraph and the requirements that we have is very similar to what you were taught in Post Foundation 1. So you must start your concluding paragraph with a restatement of your thesis statement. The difference here is that we ask you don't include the main ideas. So you're going to restate your thesis statement, but without your main ideas. And that's because the next part of your concluding paragraph is a short summary of your main ideas. So it will be repetitive or redundant if you have your main ideas is the first sentence in your conclusion, and then the summary is also discussing or summarizing the main ideas. So first sentence is your thesis statement, but without the main ideas, and then you are required to write a short summary of the main ideas of your paper. And then we ask that you end your conclusion or you end your paper with any type of final comments. So these can be suggestions, advice, recommendations, predictions. I tell my students usually to try to end on a hopeful note or a positive note, but that's a personal preference in terms of your conclusion. So these are the three required parts of your conclusion. You must have all of these if you would like the maximum points for the concluding paragraph for your term paper. So here are some transitions you can use. This is not a final list in any way. It's just a suggestion of some transitions that you can use for your conclusion. So to start the paragraph, you can start with to conclude, in conclusion, in sum. Sometimes people like to start with finally. I feel finally is a little bit lower level, so it's better to choose one of these three if you want a higher level transition, which is what we're working on this semester, trying to use more higher level transitions in our writing. When you write the summary, just like when I taught you to write the summary paper at the beginning of the semester, you want to use the transitions that are in the category of addition. So also, furthermore, moreover, in addition, additionally, because basically you're adding ideas after each other. So this is the category of transitions you want to use for the summary part. Unless you have an argumentative style focus, then you would maybe want to introduce a different transition. For example, if you have counter-argument, or if you're writing about positive and negative effects, or advantages and disadvantages, then you could also use transitions of contrast to go between the positive and negative effect, or the advantages and the disadvantage. Okay. And here for your final comments, these are some phrases you could use. This is why some governments, people, experts recommend. So you could choose governments, you could choose people, you could choose experts. This is why it is recommended. So if this is your own suggestion, your own recommendation or your own suggestion or your own piece of advice, then you can use the passive structure here. So this is why it is recommended. This is why it is suggested. Or it is suggested that. Or in the future, it would be good if. So those are various phrases you could use for your final comments. In the future, it'd be good if people, governments, experts did this. Again, this is not a final list, just some suggestions. But basically you want to feel, or the reader wants to feel when they finish reading your essay, that your essay is complete. And you do this with the last 2 sentences of your paper. And this takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill to be able to create a concluding paragraph that gives that feeling of the paper is complete. So just like I suggested with your body paragraphs, I would suggest that you sit down today or tomorrow for 30 minutes. You just kind of free write a first draft of your conclusion, save it, go to sleep, wake up tomorrow, open it, read it out loud to yourself. Then you can look at the requirements again and see what you have, what you don't have, and then start working on making sure that you have all the requirements. And then you could start to see where you could add specific transitions to it. Save it, go to sleep, wake up the next day, open it, read it out loud to yourself again, and continue to make edits and look at the requirements. So that's how I would suggest that you do it. It really helps to read things out loud. Then you can hear it. So that's a good strategy when you're editing your own writing, to read it out loud to yourself. And then you can hear how it sounds and hear some of the mistakes. Especially you'll hear the mistakes if you're reading it out loud to yourself. So this is the sample concluding paragraph that I did for this outline. So I will read it out loud now. In some, cardiovascular diseases can be dangerous for human health, and the probability of suffering from them are increased by various risk factors. So again, I have my thesis statement here, which is that there are risk factors that increase the risk for cardiovascular disease, but I don't include my main points. Okay. Remember that the same rule applies in terms of this is the first sentence of a new paragraph, so it needs to be paraphrased. Just like your topic sentences for all your body paragraphs need to be paraphrased to get the maximum points. The same with this first sentence here. So it shouldn't just be a repeat of what you have in your thesis statement in your introduction. You need to paraphrase it. So that's my first sentence here, and then this is my summary part. The first of these involves the lifestyle choices that people make, including the decision to smoke and the types of food that they consume. So if you remember, if we go up to our first part of our outline, so our first main point was lifestyle choices, and then subpoints were tobacco use and types of food. Yeah. So that's why I've included those in the first part of my summary. And then my second main points were mental health, depression and burnout, and then chronic disease, obesity and diabetes. So the first of these involves the lifestyle choices that people make, including the decision to smoke and the types of food they consume. Moreover, right, so this is the next main point, so I'm using a transition of addition. Moreover, mental health can be a risk factor for CVDs, especially if someone suffers from depression or burnout syndrome, as these conditions prevent people from engaging in positive lifestyle choices that can keep their heart healthy. Chronic disease. Now you notice here I didn't put a new transition because, again, you don't want to start every sentence with a transition. Transitions are important for connecting your ideas, but don't start every sentence with the transition. That can also give the impression that your writing is not very advanced. So I didn't put a new transition here. What I did, chronic disease is a risk factor as well. So this phrase here, as well, shows that it's an additional idea, but it's not at the start of the sentence. So that's another way that you could show a new idea, but not putting a transition at the beginning. So chronic disease is a risk factor as well, especially obesity and diabetes, as these diseases affect a person's ability to be healthy and active, which can create a situation where someone is more susceptible to CVDs. Okay. So again, 3 sentences, that's my summary, right? So you don't want it to be longer than that, especially with the word count for the final paper. So I would say 3 sentences. Most of you have 3 main points, so 3 sentences, a sentence for each. And then my final thoughts here to conclude. CVDs are a global health problem, especially with the popularity of fast food in the Western diet. This is why it would be effective if health experts united together to implement programs and strategies for preventing them. As I'm reading this, this is not the best ending note in my opinion, but it's a first draft. Remember, all good writing starts with terrible first efforts. But it's a recommendation. The second part here is recommendation. And here's an explanation more about CVDs, their global health problem. Okay. So those are the requirements for your concluding paragraphs. Again, when I go over the rubric for the final term paper, I'll show specifically on the rubric where you'll be graded for the conclusion. But you need to have these 3 parts if you want your maximum points. And as I already said, I would suggest you approach writing this paper as a process over the next 10 days. Dedicate 30 minutes a day, 40 minutes, an hour a day of just sitting and working on the paper. You're going to get a much better outcome if you do it like that, rather than waiting until the day before it is due to sit down and try to write it. So, that concludes this lecture. Hope you're all doing well and you're enjoying the term paper writing process. Have a great day.